The world owes nothing. Not a second chance, not a fair shot, not a warning. The ground hardens under the ones who fall, and most people stay down, not because the fall was too hard, but because standing back up costs something real. Most aren't willing to pay it. Most want the comeback without the cost. And so the gap between those who rise and those who stay down, it isn't talent, it isn't luck, it isn't timing. It's the decision made in the lowest, ugliest, most private moment when no one is watching to get up anyway. Not because it feels good, not because winning is guaranteed, but because staying down is no longer an option. That's not motivation. That's survival choosing sides. And survival doesn't wait for a feeling. Survival acts before the feeling arrives. The ones who conquer, and this word matters, don't stumble into greatness. Conquest is deliberate. Conquest is chosen, not won by luck, not handed over by circumstance, chosen hard and clean before the outcome is known. That's the gap nobody talks about. The ones at the top made the choice first. The results came second, not the other way around. Defeat is a classroom with no walls and no exits. Sit in it long enough and one of two things happens. Either it teaches how to hunger or it teaches how to give up. That's not a metaphor, that's pattern recognition. The broken rise again, not because the breaking was noble, but because the breaking removed everything soft. What's left after the softness is gone? Only the core. Only the unbendable thing that was always there, buried under comfort, buried under other people's opinions, buried under the life that was built to avoid the very pain that was always coming anyway. Pain is not a punishment for failure. Pain is not proof that the universe is against anyone. Pain is entry. It's the cost of being admitted to a version of yourself that comfort would never have unlocked. No one walks through that door on accident. No one stumbles into the harder version of themselves. The hunger that defeat teaches, that's not bitterness. Bitterness is just hunger with no direction. Direct it. Aim it. Let the loss mean something by refusing to let it be the last thing.
There is a kind of person who disappears after losing, backs into corners, goes quiet, stops showing up, figures that if the shadow gets small enough, the world will stop noticing. But a corpse in the sun still casts a shadow. Silence is not invisibility. Withdrawal is not disappearance. The world keeps going, and the absence becomes its own loud statement that the fall won. The ones who understand this, the ones who refuse to vanish, they show up. Damaged, incomplete, still rebuilding, they show up anyway. Because showing up when there's nothing left to prove is a different kind of power. It's the kind that can't be faked. And the world, whatever opinion it held before, recalibrates when it sees someone refuse to disappear. That's not a performance. That's not reputation management. That's refusal. Loud, physical, non-negotiable refusal to let the fall be the final word. The ones who fear the dark don't just stay blind to what's out there. The ones who fear the dark never find out what's inside themselves, because there is no internal confrontation without discomfort. There is no honest self-assessment in comfort. Comfort lies. Comfort tells stories about potential rather than results, about intentions rather than actions, about who could be rather than who is. The dark strips all of that away. The dark is where the honest version of the inventory gets done. What's actually there? What's actually usable? What has been wasted? What remains? What can still be built? No one takes that inventory under pleasant conditions. No one finds the edges of their capacity on an easy day. The edges only reveal themselves under maximum pressure.
The ones who fear the dark never get the inventory, and so they never know what's actually available to use. And they spend their entire lives operating at a fraction of what was always possible, because the dark was never entered and the honest version of themselves was never met.
Wishing doesn't build anything. Wishing is noise. Wishing fills the space between what is and what could be with words that cost nothing and produce nothing. The beast is not built in the mind. The beast is not assembled through visualization, not constructed through desire, not manifested through intention. The beast survives hell. And that word, survives, carries everything. Not enjoys, not endures gracefully, survives, claws through, absorbs the worst of it, finds the 1 inch of footing in the wreckage and holds, then moves. The ones who come out of the hard thing different, not healed, not whole, different, sharper, harder, more precise. They didn't become that way by asking for it. The hell had to be real. The cost had to be paid in full. And somewhere in the middle of the cost, the choice was made to come out the other side different instead of just broken. That's where the beast is built. Not in the wanting, in the surviving. Hope is comfortable. Hope feels like action without requiring any. Hope fills quiet evenings with the warmth of possibility while the work goes undone and the clock keeps running. Hope, left unchecked, becomes the reason nothing changed, because as long as there is hope, the urgency never fully arrives. There's always tomorrow. There's always the version of events where things work out without the cost. Trade hope for results. Not forever, not as a philosophy, but right now, in practice, in this week, in this decision. What's the result and what does it take to produce it? Not what's possible, not what might happen. What's the result and what exact action produces it? That question has no room for hope. That question only has room for mechanics. What needs to happen? When does it happen? Who makes it happen? Answer those in sequence and do the work. Hope dies in that process, and something more useful takes its place. Hope dies first. After that, only fighters remain. That's not a dark statement. That's a filter. The ones who were there for the possibility, the ones who came because the outcome seemed favorable, the ones who stayed as long as the wind was going the right direction, they leave when hope leaves. And then the room is clear. The ones who were left are the ones who were never there for the outcome. The ones who were left are there because leaving isn't something they do, not because of pride, not because of stubbornness, but because the work itself became the point somewhere along the line, and walking away from the work means walking away from the only version of themselves that is worth becoming. That's the fighter. Not someone who wins every time. Someone for whom quitting stopped being a language they were capable of speaking. Monsters don't have to be feared to be real. The alternative to fearing monsters is becoming one. Not in the violent sense, not in the cruel sense, in the sense that the thing the world was afraid of is exactly what was built. Out of spite, out of necessity, out of the decision that if the world was going to treat someone like a threat, the full investment should be made into becoming worth the fear. The ones who were written off, the ones who were told their ceiling was low, the ones who were handed limitations like gifts, the ones who built something monstrous from those limitations didn't do it for applause. The work was done in the absence of applause, in the presence of doubt, in the direct face of a world that had already made up its mind. Becoming the thing the world feared isn't an act of aggression, it's an act of consequence. The world produced the conditions. What grew in those conditions was not what the world expected. Weakness is a coffin, not because being weak is shameful, but because staying weak is a choice, and the choice has a cost, and the cost is everything that could have been built, every version of life that required more. The burial of weakness is not a dramatic event. It doesn't happen in a single decision. It happens in the 1,000 small decisions that precede the result. The choice to do one more rep when the body is done. The choice to make the call that the fear said to avoid. The choice to stay in the room when everything is uncomfortable and the exit is right there. The coffin is built and buried in those decisions. And once it's buried, the thing that remains moves differently. There's a directness to the movement of someone who has done the work of burying what was weak. Not arrogance, not performance, directness. The kind that comes from having settled the internal argument and arrived at something more solid. The world is not trying to break anyone. The world isn't thinking about anyone at all. The world is simply running its mechanics, opportunity and obstacle, pressure and release, cost and result. And the ones who survive those mechanics aren't the ones who found a way around them. The ones who survive learned to run harder than the mechanics. Because the alternative isn't being spared. The world doesn't destroy the weak as a punishment. It destroys them because destruction is what the mechanics produce when there's nothing there to push back. Push back. Not once, not until the first loss. Push back relentlessly. Absorb the damage. Keep producing output. Keep forcing the mechanics to account for the presence of someone who will not stop. That's the answer. Not strategy, not timing, not waiting for the conditions to improve. The answer is output. Relentless, consistent, undeniable output in the face of conditions that were never designed to support it.
Mercy has a place, not in the pursuit, not in the space between where someone is and where the work demands they go. In that space, mercy is the most expensive thing available. Mercy says, this is enough. Mercy says, the effort was worthy of the result. Mercy says, rest here, the road was long. And all of that is true, and none of it produces the next level. Victory is for the ones who apply mercy in its correct place, not to themselves in the middle of the fight, but to the people the victory allows them to serve. The win comes first, the mercy comes after. The ones who reverse that sequence wonder later why the results never arrived. The loss doesn't have to be the story. The loss is data. The loss is the answer to the question of exactly where the gap is between what was prepared and what was required. No loss, if it's treated as data, is ever just a loss. It is a map. The map only becomes visible in the aftermath, when the sting fades enough to read clearly. Read it. Find the exact point where the preparation ran out. Find the exact decision that cost the most. Find the exact variable that, if different, changes the result. Then change it. Not by wishing it were different, by building the thing that makes it different. The ones who say they didn't lose, they're not in denial. The ones who say it and mean it are the ones who understand that the fight isn't over, and that a loss inside a fight that isn't over isn't a loss. It's round one feedback. Use it.
Pain comes regardless, not for some, for all. The only variable is the relationship to it. The ones who run from pain still get caught because pain doesn't require pursuit to arrive. The ones who try to numb it find that the numbing wears thin at exactly the moments when full capacity is required. The ones who control pain are the ones who walked toward it before it arrived on their terms,
trained for it, built a relationship with discomfort that removed the shock, removed the paralysis, and left only the mechanics of moving through it. Pain unmanaged becomes the ceiling. Pain controlled becomes the floor. The decision about which one it becomes is made long before the pain arrives. The training is the decision. When everyone leaves, and there will be a moment when everyone leaves, the only thing that remains is what was built internally. Not the network, not the reputation, not the support system. What remains is what was built before any of that existed, before any of it was needed, in the long, unglamorous hours when no one was watching and no one was clapping, and the work still got done. The rage of abandonment is real. The sting of standing alone after standing with others, that's real. But rage directed outward is wasted. Rage directed inward toward the work, that's an army. Every burn, every sleepless night, every moment of proving the empty room wrong, that's a soldier. Build enough of them, and the army doesn't need external reinforcement. The army is self-sustaining. The army is internal. And internal armies don't surrender.
Being a victim is a position, not a permanent condition, a position, and positions can be changed. The moment the decision is made to stop organizing the narrative around the harm done and start organizing it around the response, the position shifts. This isn't about ignoring the harm. This isn't about pretending damage didn't happen. The scars are real proof of the damage, but the scars are also real proof of the survival. The same marks that record the wound record the fact that the wound did not finish the work. The wound started something. The survival continued something else. That continuation, deliberate, driven, refusing to let the wound write the ending, that's what the scars are for. Not to display, to remember, to remind in the moments when the weight returns that the weight was carried before, and the weight lost. Fear is cargo. Cargo slows movement. Cargo has to be justified at every checkpoint. Why is this being carried? What's the value of this weight? What's the cost of keeping it versus the cost of leaving it? Fear doesn't protect. Fear narrows. Fear shrinks the available options to the ones that guarantee the least exposure. And the options that guarantee least exposure are the ones that guarantee the least result. Leave the fear on the road, not by conquering it in one dramatic act, but by making the decision on a Tuesday when nothing feels dramatic to move without it. Just this once, just this decision, just this action, and then again, until the movement becomes the habit, and the habit becomes the identity, and the identity is someone who moves without waiting for safety.
Legends aren't built by the comfortable. The comfortable have options. The comfortable have alternatives. The comfortable can afford to do the safe version of the thing that the desperate do without safety nets. The desperate have no alternatives. The desperate have no version of this story where pulling back produces survival. The desperate have to go, have to build, have to produce something from nothing, using pressure as the raw material, because pressure is the only thing available in abundance. And the thing built under those conditions, the thing assembled with no margin for failure, with no backup, no plan B, no comfortable fallback, that thing is different. That thing has a density that comfortable things don't have, because comfort never had to be that serious. Fate is what happens to the ones who wait. The ones who wait for the right timing, the right alignment of circumstances, the moment when the risk calculates cleanly, and the odds are favorable, and the outcome feels guaranteed. Those ones are still waiting.
Fate fills the space that choice refuses to occupy. And fate is not benevolent. Fate is not malicious. Fate is indifferent. Fate produces outcomes for the ones who removed themselves from the equation. The ones who choose first, before the timing is right, before the odds are clean, before the guarantee is anywhere in sight, they remove themselves from the equation of fate. The choice is the act of claiming ownership over the sequence of events that would otherwise just happen regardless. No waiting, no alignment. The choice made now in bad conditions with incomplete information and no guarantee. That's the answer to fate.
The ones who said nothing was there, who cataloged every limitation, every ceiling, every reason for doubt, built the blueprint for what to exceed. Not on purpose, but the list of everything that was wrong became the list of everything to disprove. And dismantling that list, point by point, result by result, is a different kind of fuel. Not hot fuel, cold fuel, long burning, the kind that doesn't explode and then die, the kind that sustains a decade of quiet, relentless production in the direction of everything they said was impossible. When the results arrive, the fear in the ones who set the ceiling is not an accident. The result was always aimed at exactly that. Tears are biological. They don't carve anything. The carving happens in the hours after the tears, when the decision is made about what comes next. The grief is allowed. The breakdown is allowed. The full cost of the loss is allowed to land. And then, not on a schedule, not on a timeline set by anyone else, but when the internal thing that drives the work reasserts itself louder than the grief, the carving begins. Will carves, not inspiration, not emotion, not the right conditions. Will, applied consistently in the direction of the result, without waiting for the feeling to confirm that the timing is right. The feeling comes after the movement, not before.
The world may demand collapse. The world may produce conditions so consistently hostile that survival itself becomes a statement. And the statement is this: give the rise. Not the performance of resilience, the actual biological documented rise. Metrics, results, new levels reached in the exact year the world was placing bets on disappearance. The rise is the response, not the words, not the explanation, not the rebuttal. The rise, visible, undeniable. In the places that the world understands, results, output, measurable progress, in those exact places, the answer is given, and no one can argue with it, because it's not a claim, it's evidence. Doubt is not neutral. Doubt is not the cautious cousin of confidence. Doubt acts. Doubt erodes the edges of decisions. Doubt delays the action that needed to happen yesterday. Doubt introduces the pause that turns a sure thing into a missed thing. Kill the doubt before the future arrives in it. Not by ignoring it, by producing evidence against it. Every action taken in the direct face of doubt is evidence that doubt is wrong. Accumulate enough of that evidence, and the doubt stops finding footing. Not gone, quieter. Quieter enough to act through. Quieter enough that the work gets done, and the work becomes the loudest argument against every version of doubt that ever tried to claim the future first.
Night is not the natural state. Night doesn't end on its own. Day breaks it. Active, applied, breaking the dark with the force of existing in full capacity in the place where the dark said nothing could survive. The darkness had an opinion. The dawn didn't ask for it. The dawn showed up. That's the only mechanism.
Not hope that the dark will lift, not patience waiting for natural cycles. The work, the output, the relentless production that eventually becomes undeniable even to the dark. The dark cannot hold against sufficient output. The dark cannot sustain itself in the face of consistent, compounding evidence that the light was always the stronger force. It just needed activation. No fate, no assigned destiny, no external force arbitrating the distance between where this started and where this ends. Just the decision, repeated, refined, in the direction of everything that was said was impossible. Just the horizon, which is not a wall. The horizon moves. The horizon is not the limit. The horizon is the proof that there is always further to go, always another mile of real estate between where the work is now and where the work can be. That space is not a sentence. That space is the assignment. Close the distance, not because anyone is watching, not because the result is guaranteed. Close it because this is what was chosen, and the choice, made hard and clean and early, is the only authority that matters. No fate, no luck, just the decision, and what the decision builds, and the distance it closes. Starting now.